Your pre-music career took some interesting turns. You were a child actor, I believe.
Yes, I was.
What was the extent of your work there?
I started off when I was a kid, 7 or 8, doing television commercials. The first one having been a show called Captain Video. That was in the days of live television. Mm-hmm. And I did some various dramatic parts on TV, the culmination of which was a Broadway show called Fanny, which was quite a big success. It was directed by Joshua Logan and produced by David Merrick, who went on to have a string of hits after that. So it was kind of it was a big show. It lasted on Broadway for about 2 or 3 years. And then after that, I kind of left that whole end of the business and went, just concentrated on my studies and went to college, but was playing in bands all the time. So I was kind of bitten by, I think, having been in Fanny, kind of was the instrument that really kind of woke my career up as a musician.
You also studied psychology, I believe.
Yes, I did.
Were you ever close to a career in that field?
Well, I was actually going to be a doctor. I went through after I graduated college, I went to a year of medical school, and I decided I didn't want to do that. And then I did some postgraduate work I moved to Europe, and I did some postgraduate work in psychology at the Free University of Berlin. And then after about a year, I decided I wanted to kind of put my academic studies to a rest. And so that's when I put a band together and started touring Europe.
So how did you find your way into the band that became Spooky Tooth?
Well, the first band I was with was called the New York Times, and we were just working around Germany, and we had this offer to go to Norway and do some shows. So we did some shows, and we were in Oslo, and it was we were asked to open up for Traffic. It was their first gig, and Chris Blackwell, their manager and founder of Island Records, was there. And we had a friend in common whose name was Jimmy Miller, producer, who had just finished producing Spencer Davis, I'm a Man, and Give Me Some Lovin'. And Jimmy and I had grown up together in New Jersey. So we were talking about Jimmy, and Chris asked me if I wanted to come back to London and record, and I said sure. So we went back, and to make a long story short, he put me together with these 4 other musicians who were in a band called Art, and I came up with the name Spooky Tooth, and Jimmy Miller produced us, our first album, and our second one as well.
So obviously this meant you having to relocate to England. Was that a tough decision for you at the time?
It wasn't, because I really wanted to live in Europe, and so it wasn't, not at all. I was actually really happy, because England was really jumping in those days. It was that was the late 60s, and there was, the music business was all new and fresh and healthy, and you weren't getting your stuff sampled and all that kind of stuff that was going on now. It was a very thriving, healthy business. So it was great. I was thrilled to be there.
Just the same, that must have been a wonderful feeling to come back to America as part of a successful band to tour.
It was, yeah, very much so, because English bands were really, really held in high esteem. So I wasn't coming back as an American, but as a member of a British band.
Did it create mixed feelings for you at all, having to leave your homeland to find that initial success?
Not really. I think at the time I was at that stage in my life where I needed to go off and find myself. So I did. There were certain things about it, of course, my family and stuff that I missed. But I think the positive side of it, having been around an environment of such creativity and all that, outweighed that.
As you mentioned, you're with Island Records in those early days, and they were a label that had a reputation for really nurturing their artists and letting them develop. Was that pretty much how it was with you guys?
Definitely. Yeah. We were actually the label was started by Traffic and Spooky Tooth. And, Chris Blackwell, he was an entrepreneurial person, and he owned a lot of real estate, so he gave both Traffic and Spooky Tooth a farm. We each had our farm to live on. He didn't give it to us. He let us stay there. Yeah. But it was great. We were able to be out there and get our music together and rehearse and write songs. So it was really a great place to be.
A situation like that would be virtually unheard of now, wouldn't it?
No, totally.
Yeah. When did you notice things beginning to change in the record industry, but that it and I noticed it becoming more business orientated?
I think it started in the 80s, slowly started in the 80s, and it just gradually got, as the world, and particularly America, became more corporatized, and record companies became public companies, and no longer controlled by entrepreneurs like Chris Blackwell or Jerry Moss or the Terry Ellis and Chris Wright, those kind of people, David Geffen. It started to be more business. It started to be more like bean counters running the show.
Yeah, and not being run by people who actually loved music.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Was that a major catalyst in you setting up your own label eventually, as you did?
Yes, it was. I thought, I'm not gonna go through this. I'm gonna have my own label and do it the way I want to do it. And that's what I'm doing. I dove into the ocean with all the sharks.
Just going back to the Spooky Tooth days, you had a brief period away from the band, and then you returned for a second stint. What was the catalyst for you leaving that first time?
Well, they had released we had done an album after Spooky 2. Spooky 2 was our most successful album, and we had done another album that we were asked to do, not as a band, but just to play as session people on it, and it was called Ceremony, and we did it with this French electronic music composer. And Chris Blackwell thought, oh, well, that sounds fine. Let's just put it out as your next album, which was a really bad mistake because it was not nearly as good as Spooky 2 as a musical piece of work. It was very experimental. And I got really upset with that decision because, we had such a great thing going for us. And, there was a little bit of trouble brewing in the band as well, personality-wise, so I decided to leave. And I had all these songs that I had written that I wanted to do my own way and not in the context of a band. And I started to play as well on other people's sessions, and I met George Harrison and went through Klaus Vormann, actually, who had played in my first solo album. So I started doing my own stuff.
So when you went back again that second time, was there a different feel, a different vibe in the band for you?
Well, there was. There were different players. Part of when I was doing that 3-year stint of my solo career, I met Mick Jones, and Mick was in my last the last part of my solo career, which is a band called Wright's Wonder Wheel. And Mick, then I asked Mick to join Spooky Tooth with us, and I took the drummer, Bryson Graham, from my solo band, and then we joined forces with Mike Harrison and another bass player at the time, Archie Leggett, I believe his name was. And so it was a different incarnation. We did 3 other albums.
Now, you mentioned George Harrison. You formed an alliance with George and had the pleasure of working with him extensively through the years. Any standout memories there?
Oh, wow, there's so many, because we were such close friends. We went to, the first time I ever went to India, George invited me there. Ravi Shankar hosted us, and that was in 1974. It was an amazing time, because George and I just had this natural kind of affinity. Both of us were very much involved in Eastern philosophy, and he was kind of like my mentor. So it was a great experience just having done that. And then, we did a lot of cool things together. We went from New York to London once on the QE2, and he was telling me all the stories about the early Beatles and all that. It was amazing.
Tell us about the All Things Must Pass sessions. That's my favourite of all the Beatles solo albums. It's a magical record and still stands up beautifully today. What do you recall of those sessions?
Well, the first time I ever was, when I got the call to play, it was from Mal Evans, who was George's road manager, and he told me to come by the studio, to come by Apple Studios in Abbey Road. It was Abbey Road Studios to play, but he gave me the wrong time, and I actually arrived late, and I walked into the room, and there's like Eric Clapton and George and Ringo and the guys in Badfinger, and I think Billy Preston and all these people, and Phil Spector was producing, and George was really sweet, and I got down, and I'm trying to learn the parts, because they were almost ready to take this, and I'm fumbling on the piano, on the World is a Piano, and all of a sudden the talkback comes on, and it was Phil Spector, who was this kind of brash guy from New York, saying, "Wait a minute, who's that guy on the piano? What's he making all these mistakes for?" And so I was crushed, But George was really sweet. He came over and he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. You know, we have plenty of time." So, and we immediately had a bond. And then I wound up playing on the whole album. It was an incredible experience. I'll never forget one day John and Yoko walked in and was checking out the songs and stuff, and it was, you know, there I was in the room with John and George, and it was just incredible.
Now, through George, you also, as you said before, went to India and you got to know some wonderful musicians over there. What did you take out of that experience?
I really started to learn about Indian music through George, and it was amazing. It was just, you know, opened me up to a whole new you know, area of music. You know, Indian songs are very, very long. You know, sometimes they go on for like, you know, 40 minutes and stuff. I'll never forget this one time that it was George, Jeff Lynne, and I were at this Indian concert in L.A., and the first song was, you know, it was kind of like a half an hour, and I could see that Jeff was dying to have a cigarette. So he said, "Oh, I'll wait until the next song," and the next song started, and I said, "You know, this song is an hour and a half long." So, but no, it turned me on to a whole new culture, which I was, you know, I'm still very much involved in.
It would be impossible to talk to you and not have the subject of the song Dreamweaver come up. What do you recall of the actual writing of the song?
Well, when I was in India, George had given me this book of poems by a yogi master named Paramahansa Yogananda. And one of the poems was called God, 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 and one of the lines of the poem were, "When at night my mind weaves dreams, on that sacred cloth do I emboss the words God, God, God." And I read that sentence like a couple of times, and I had my little songwriting journal out, and I wrote down the words Dreamweaver. I coined the two words together, and I just put it there. And then one day, I was in the English countryside, and I had my acoustic guitar, and I was looking for a song to write, and I just put up the name Dreamweaver, and I just started to write it, and came out in about a half an hour.
Did you instantly have a sound in mind for how the song would come up in the studio, that elaborate production that it became, or was that something that just evolved during the recording process?
That was something that evolved during the recording process. Because it was the very last song that I put on my album. It was between that and another song, and David Foster was playing keyboards on the album at the time, and I asked David, I said, "Which of these two do you think I should put on?" And he said, "Oh, I'd choose Dreamweaver." Thank God he said that.
Yeah, lucky choice.
And so, and then I thought, well, this is not a single or anything, so I'll just make it like as far out as I possibly could using all these electronic sounds, because I was just then starting to get into synthesizers. And so when I finished it and it got on the album, the radio picked it up immediately, and I thought, wow, that's cool, because that was a song that I really wanted to just experiment with, and everybody's playing it. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise.
Sure. The song seems to have taken on a life of its own through the years. It's been used in so many settings. Is it a strange feeling for you at times to see it out there in so many places? Is it easy to forget that it is actually your song? No, it's not. No, I always remember it's my song, but yeah, I mean, I pretty closely monitor that as to what, you know, happens. You know, if people want to use it in this weird way, I say no. I mean, I think that the limit was, you know, which was a funny way, was in Wayne's World, you know, with that Mike Myers and Dana Carvey had used it. You know, I think that was kind of that was funny, you know. And they used it a lot on Saturday Night Live with Madonna and those kind of situations. But I pretty much follow that pretty closely, because I don't want it in any way to be demeaned by, you know, some weird thing. Yeah. Did the song's success put a lot of pressure on you to follow it up? Oh, yeah. It definitely did. As a matter of fact, the next album I did after that was kind of like a little bit more esoteric than the Dreamweaver album was. And it didn't have that initial hit singles to propel it, even though it did sell well, but it didn't have that huge hit that Dreamweaver had. But a lot of people, fans, you know, write to me and they say that that's their favorite album, The Light Up Smile. Yeah. You got into scoring music for films in the 80s. How important was that to you now in terms of your further development as a writer? You know, it's funny that you said it. I was just thinking about that this morning.
Films are okay, but unfortunately, the majority of them are really awful. And it's such a drag, to be in a studio and watching this horrible scene that you have to come up with some creative music for. I was fortunate that the one major film that I did was called Endangered Species, and the director was this really cool guy, and it was more of an artsy film, so that I had total creative control over. But then I worked with Sylvester Stallone and that kind of stuff, and that became more manufactured kind of stuff. I mean, I think with the right piece of film, I think it's a fun thing to do. It's just something that I haven't really focused my life on. I think in the last few years, really, I've been focusing on building this label up, and my son and helping my son's band called Intangible. They're a rock band whose album just came out about a month ago. So I've been putting all my energy into that.
Is it more difficult writing for a situation like that for a movie score? I guess you find it more limiting because the writing has to be directed towards that particular piece of work, rather than with your own songwriting, where you've pretty much got a clean slate to write whatever you like.
Yes, it is. You're definitely right. You have to, because you're writing within the parameters of what the director wants, because he's really calling the shots. He'll say, okay, I want you to create a mood like such and such, and he'll describe it, and then you might create this beautiful piece of music, and it gets mixed way, way back under dialogue, so it's kind of like you never hear it anyway.
Yeah. We mentioned the Indian music before, but you've always been open to exploring music from other cultures and dabbling in what I guess people commonly refer to now as world music. Are you comfortable with that tag?
The tag of being a world musician?
Well, yeah, and the tag of calling it world music in general.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I look at my music kind of like it's going to like a spice rack, and you pull up something from here, and you take out something from there, and you mix it together. And I don't like to be formula-driven, so to speak. I like to have really broad kind of possibilities when I'm creating my music.
Now, you mentioned your son is a musician as well. Tell us a little bit about more what he's doing there.
Well, he's got a rock band, and they're called Intangible. And he's just now starting to tour and promote his record. His first single that came out got to number 28 in the rock charts, which was really good for a new band on an indie label. It was actually phenomenal. People were asking me how I did it, and it's really just was putting a team of good people together.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a lot of work, and you have to just, look at all the options, and it's, we live in such a marketing-driven world right now that you're constantly looking at how to promote it online and how to do all these, things. It's certainly not nearly as easy as when I came through the ranks, I can just tell you that. I feel really sorry for young artists right now. I mean, when they go out and play, like in L.A., they have to pay the club owner, so many tickets or guarantee so many tickets before, they can get the gig. It's called pay for play, which is the most bizarre concept. I never experienced that when we were going through the ranks.
Does he come to you often for career advice?
He does, and I helped him kind of produce his album. But he's pretty good. He's his own person. I mean, he writes really, really good songs, and he's a great lyricist. But he does come to me for advice.
And what about yourself these days, Gary? You're performing live still a fair bit?
I stopped in the last year because, again, I was focused on this label, but I plan on going back and going out on tour fairly soon. I'd like to come to Australia, as a matter of fact. I've never been there.
No, I was just thinking, I don't think we've ever had the pleasure.
Yeah, I'd love to go down there.
And what about recording-wise? Are you working on anything there?
I'm just in the process of starting to write songs now for a new album, which I probably will do maybe later on in the fall, early next year.
And can you give us any hints to a musical direction there on that record? I've been thinking about this, but I might actually, do something along the lines of this real simplistic approach like I did when I did the Dreamweaver album, with just, a lot of spacey kind of echoey kind of things. It'll probably define itself more as I start writing songs, but I think I'm going to do something different that I've not done before. Tremendous. We look forward to it. Gary, thanks so much for your time. It's been a real treat to catch up with you. Thanks for all that wonderful music over the years.
Thank you.
And we'll look forward to your upcoming recording project. And yeah, we do hope we can get you down here to Australia. We'd love to see you.
No, I'd love to come.
Fantastic. And thanks again for taking the time out so early for you.
You're welcome.
Much appreciated.
Okay.
Okay, you take care.
Take care now.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.